Hi, welcome to Consumer Insights. Today we're going to talk about how do you go about figuring out how your product or service is going to fit into the life of a consumer in a way that's going to make their life better. Now, there's lots and lots of ways that we can go about getting information. Digital media has given us so many opportunities. Companies have spent years mining data on each and every one of us. They look at our social media, they look at the things that we pause on as we're going through our Facebook feeds, they listen to us. Yeah, we know they're not supposed to, but they do. And they know exactly what we look at, what we buy online, what we read online, and then they curate their advertising to point the right stuff to you. Now that's kind of creepy, but at the same time it's pretty cool because they're able to customize the advertising that's just for you and not have to go see stuff that isn't relevant. Now, how that all happens is through consumer insights and consumer research. And so today we're going to talk about the different ways that you can go about doing consumer research yourself. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is called a focus group. A focus group is really just getting a bunch of people together in a room and having a discussion. The focus group room usually has a mirror on one side that the people don't know is a two-way mirror, and marketing people and advertising people sit on the back side of that mirror and watch and listen to the conversation as it's going forward. Now there's a moderator in the room that leads the discussion, and the people are then led through a discussion based on what we the marketers wanted to have them probe that day. Now a focus group is pretty cool for getting what we call qualitative information. Qualitative data is information where we're just getting the idea from a few people. You can't say if 8 people in your focus group liked your idea, you can't go make a commercial and say 8 out of 10 people love this new idea. Can't do that. But it gives us a sense of direction as to whether or not we're headed down the right path. So we oftentimes do qualitative research at the very beginning of a project so that we can see whether or not we're heading in the right direction. Focus groups are relatively cheap. They cost about $5,000 to do. That pays for the people to come to the group, that pays for the moderator, that pays for the facility, that pays for paying the people, that pays for the refreshments. And you usually get a videotape of the focus group at the end so you can go back and review it. But focus groups you can do really easy and cheap on your own. Just throw a pizza in the middle of the table, and in a college you've got plenty of people that are willing to talk to you. So you don't have to spend a lot of money, but you should always talk to people before you start down a path because you might be in the wrong place and you need to make sure that what you're thinking about is going the right direction. Once we've kind of figured out a direction and we think we're down the right path, then we move to what's called quantitative research. Quantitative research is research that's done on a large quantity of people. Therefore, we're able to take the results and project those out on the general population. Now, to get a projectable result for the United States, that usually means you have to have about 2,000 people take your survey. Randomized people, not just people that you've selected, your own customers, that doesn't count. It has to be a random group of people selected from across the United States to get a projectable result. Now, some of you may have been to Disneyland at some point, and when you walked through the gate, had someone approach you with an iPad that asks, can I ask you a few questions? And so they'll say, what's your zip code? And so they'll type that in. How many people are here in your party today, and what are their ages? What hotel are you staying at, and how many days do you plan on being here at the park? With just those 4 questions, you can mine a lot of data. You know where they live, how long they're going to be there. You can ask them what hotel they're staying at. If they're staying at the Jolly Rancher across the street, that's a cheap Motel 6 kind of hotel, or if they're staying at the Grand Floridian, you know that you've got a different type of consumer and how much money they've got. And so lots and lots of people, companies, do surveys to get information on their customers. So there are a couple of big companies that help you do surveys. One is Qualtrics, and the other is SurveyMonkey. And on both of those, they're really simple and easy to use, and you can put together a survey in about 10 minutes to ask questions. And so, putting together a survey and getting some real data is a really good place to start as you're moving down the path of, is this idea any good or not? Once you've kind of flushed out the idea through some quantitative and some qualitative research, then you might move on to what we call a mall intercept, where you try to expose the product to people and get both qualitative and quantitative research at the same time. So in some malls across America, there's storefronts that just have a sign on it that says like Q Insights. And there's no merchandise in the store, there's just a desk. But typically there's a person standing outside with a clipboard, and they're looking for people who fit the demographic profile of whatever it is they're testing that day. So let's say that Mattel is now testing today with a new Barbie doll. And so the person out front might be looking for moms with little girls ages about 6 to 12. And when she spots one, she'll approach and say, hey, would you like to come back and see a new doll that we're showing to people today? We'd like to get your opinion of it. We'll give you 25 bucks, and it'll take about 15 minutes. And they go back into a back room, it has couches and a TV, and they'll sit down, and the person will say, well, let us show you the commercial for this new doll, and they'll show the commercial. And they'll ask some questions. So how did you like the commercial? What did you think about Barbie? And then after they've flushed those questions out, they'll ask the little girl, would you like to see the Barbie doll? And she'll say, yeah, sure. So they'll bring out the package, they'll hand it to her. They'll watch as the little girl's trying to get it out of the package to make sure that it's okay for her to be able to get out without having 10 million wires tying down the Barbie. And while that is going on, the researcher will be talking to the mom and saying, so, what do you think about Barbie's clothes? What do you think about her hair? Is she showing a little too much cleavage? Because if mom doesn't like the doll, no matter how much the little girl likes the doll, that doll's not going to get bought. So they're fleshing that out, and then finally at the end they'll say, okay, so if this doll was available at Christmas, how likely do you think you'd be to buy it? And they get a purchase intent score. So mall intercepts are a really good way to get both quantitative and qualitative research at the same time. Once you've kind of gone through all of those steps now and you think, well, I've got a pretty good idea, you still want to try to mitigate your risk, because if you decide to launch a product, if you want to launch nationwide, you've got to have enough product made to fill up every store across America. And that's a lot of product. And so, rather than making millions and millions of units of something that you're still not sure it's going to sell, you make up a few units and you ship them to one town or one geography and you test it there. So you may not be surprised to know that Salt Lake City is the #1 test market for children's products because there's so many children in the Utah market. But so a company will make up some product, they'll ship it out to a town, and then they'll put it in the market. You as a consumer have no idea that it's a test because it just looks like a new product that's shown up in your store. But the reality of it is you're the only area that's got it. And so they'll run advertising for it. They'll try to mimic what they would do on a national basis in just your town. A couple of them that I found recently was Doritos was recently testing a cereal down in the Phoenix market. Don't think it's going to go anywhere. Pepsi last summer was testing cola meets coffee. Coffee Pepsi. And that's rolling out right now. M&M's over Halloween tested some candy corn M&M's. And that was about a year ago. And this fall, I didn't see it out there, so it must have failed in its test. But the cool thing about test markets is, again, you can just make up a little bit, put it in a market, pretend like you're marketing just like you would on a national basis, and see what happens. So that if it fails, you aren't out millions and millions of dollars in advertising and in wasted product. Once we got past a test market, then we go to what's called bases. And bases is something that you probably never have to do in your life, but it's cool to know that it's there and how it works. So bases is a product sold by the Nielsen Company. The AC Nielsen Company is the keeper of all data. Every time you go to a store and you punch in your phone number or you let them swipe your key tag, that store in AC Nielsen is collecting data on you. And so they know what products you buy, they know what size you buy it in, they know when you buy it, how frequently you buy it. They know all of that information, and all of it gets worked back in their computers. And so when companies come in and want to do a basis test, they know exactly what you've been buying, so they can see whether or not what they're testing on you is working. So a basis test, let's give you an example. So the first time I got exposed to a basis test was when I was at P&G, and I got told to do a study on a basis test for a product that had just failed, which was Folgers Coffee Singles. And it had been done in 2 markets, and it had gone on for about a year, and it only got about a 2% market share. So the division manager called me and said, hey, would you go take a look at this, please? And so I got on a plane, I flew to the 2 markets, and I sat down and talked to consumers. The cool thing about a basis test is you know who got advertised to, you know how much they got advertised, and you also know whether or not they bought it. So we were able to put together some focus groups of people that had been heavily advertised with the product, some that had not been advertised at all, and we knew whether or not they had bought the product. So in sitting down and doing the research and talking to these people, what we found was that the people who were buying Folgers Coffee Singles tended to be people who used instant coffee. And the reason that some of them didn't switch to Folgers Coffee Singles was they thought there was a price discrepancy. The Folgers Coffee Singles were about 40 cents more than an 8-ounce jar of instant coffee. So that led us to a pricing issue. We also discovered that, or we couldn't figure out why we had damaged product coming back all the time. We had a lot of damaged product that was being returned. And so I talked to the guys in the storerooms and I said, why are we getting so much damaged product? And they said, because you guys are idiots. You keep putting, you put your boxes on the pallets, and they were overhanging the edge of the pallets by about 1.5 inches. And when we're driving around in the back room and we're trying to put those pallets in, they're getting crushed by products that are already in there. So how do you fix that problem now? Well, we went back and we said, okay, so we need to somehow fix the pricing discrepancy. You didn't want to lower price. We never want to lower price. How do you keep margin yet lower price? Well, you take out some product. So we took 2 bags of coffee singles out of the box. We redesigned the boxes then so they were smaller and they would fit on the pallet. And when we took the 2 products out, we suddenly had a 10-cent price advantage versus the 8-ounce jar of instant coffee. So we also found during the focus groups that people didn't like the girl we had in the commercial for some reason. So we made a new commercial. We took out the product, we shrunk the boxes, we put it back out there, and it got a 9% market share. And so we were able to quickly scale that up, introduce it nationwide, and that product still lives today. But if we hadn't had the basis test in order to do that kind of information, it never would have happened. So let me kind of explain how the basis tests work. So Nielsen has found some cities across America that roughly represent America. So they've got the right kind of number of people with education levels, white collars, blue collars, age demographics, children, senior citizens, ethnicities, incomes. So they find these cities that somehow kind of match total US. And there's all kind of medium-sized cities. They're like 50 to 75,000 people live in these towns. And they go in and they wire up the whole town. So every place that you buy product is all tapped into the Nielsen computers. When you move into town, they come to your door and they say, hey, welcome. We've got some secrets we'd like to tell you. Number one, we're going to give you your cable TV and your internet for free. Doesn't that sound cool? That's going to save you a couple $100s a month, right? And at Christmas, at the beginning of December, we're going to give you a check for $1,500 to help you buy your Christmas presents every year. Isn't that nice? Sure is. So if you want those things, all you got to do is be part of our consumer panel, which all that means is that we're going to give you a little key fob, and every time you go in and you buy something, you swipe that key fob across the scanner. Pretty easy, right? So everybody's in. So now when Nielsen comes out to install your cable, they put in a different type of cable box than you've ever seen before. It's called individually addressable. And what that means is that they can send a commercial directly to you that nobody else sees. And so the way that might work is, let's say that Gillette is going to do a basis test. They've got a new razor that they want to try. You know, razors started off with 1 blade, then they went to 2 blades, then they went to 5 blades with a Gillette Quattro. And now they want to test a 10-blade system, which they're calling Gillette Quantum. And so the target audience for those is males aged 35 to 59. And so they're going to look at the households in the market, and they're going to break them up into buckets, fairly even-sized buckets, where they'll say, okay, so in this group of households, we are going to test what would be a $20 million national advertising campaign if we were to run this nationwide. Of course, it's not going to cost anywhere near that, because it's only about 15,000 households that are going to be getting that in this one town. And then they'll take a second group and they'll say, okay, so this group we're going to test a $10 million advertising plan on. And then this third group, we're not going to give anybody anything. We'll use that as a control group. Then we're going to put the products in the store. We're going to see what happens. And so the way that it would manifest itself would be, let's say you're watching an NFL game on Sunday, and the first commercial break comes up, and the national TV ad that CBS is running is for Domino's Pizza. But the people in Group 1, they're not going to see the Domino's commercial. Instead, they're going to see the Gillette Quattro commercial, or the Gillette Quantum commercial. And the people in Group 2, they're going to see the Domino's commercial, and the people in Group 3, they're going to see the Domino's commercial. The second commercial set comes up, and it's a Chevy Silverado ad. Well, they're going to see Gillette Quantum again. They're going to see Gillette Quantum, and they're going to see Chevy Silverado. And so that goes on for like 6 months, where these people are just getting bombed with the ads. These are getting about half as often, and they're not getting any at all. And they're reading the sales results. And so after about 6 months, they'll stop and they'll say, okay, so where are we here? And in this group, we sold 649 razors. And in Group 2, we sold 598. And in Group 3, we sold 18. So clearly the advertising was working. But the number between the 20 million and the 10 million wasn't that great. It was only about 50 razors. So they might stop then and say, okay, well, let's see how we can do, if we can fine-tune the advertising spend. So they might start around 2, where they say, okay, we're going to spend 12.5, 10, and 7.5 this time. And they'll test it again for about another 6 months and then read it again, so they can try to optimize their sales versus their advertising spend. You know, and you can say, well, that's very expensive and it takes a long time. But if you're going to save, you know, $10, $11 million over the course of a year by optimizing your advertising spend, that's money well spent. So that's how a basis test works. And so, you know, they're really cool. They're very expensive. They cost about $1 million to execute. But you can control all of the variables. You can control, you know, what your package looks like, where it's placed on the shelf, how it's priced. You control all the advertising. You know who's bought it. You can go in and do research like we did with the Folgers thing while the test is going on and see if there's anything we need to change. So it's a pretty cool system. You know, you'll probably never have to use it in your lifetime, but it's good to know that it's there just in case. Now we're going to move to in-home testing, where, you know, sometimes they'll put a camera in the house. Sometimes there'll be a little guy with a white coat standing in your kitchen waiting to watch you cook breakfast in the morning. And yeah, it's a little weird, but, you know, people record their whole lives and put it on the internet now, so it's not nearly as weird as it used to be. But I want to take you through a couple of examples, because, you know, what people do in their households and what they tell you are sometimes different. And so you need to be able to see them actually doing things in their homes, so you can see exactly what's happening. And that's the point of doing in-home testing. So we're going to use two examples today. First is Tide, and then we're going to talk about Duncan Hines. Well, so for Tide, I want you to think for a second, if you use liquid laundry detergent, how much do you put in your load? Do you measure it out exactly the way that it's told on the bottle and put just that right amount in? Do you put maybe a little more in because you're dirtier than other people? Or do you just don't know and you just dump? Now, in research, most people don't put in the right amount. Most people put in more detergent than is recommended. Now, why should Tide care about that? Because you're using more product. Well, there's one camp that says, yeah, that's fine, let them go ahead and do it. But there's another camp that says, we want people using the right amount of detergent, because if you overuse the detergent, there's a likelihood that it's not going to rinse completely out of your clothes. And there'll be some soap solids left. Now, you're probably not going to be able to notice it because it's on a kind of a microscopic level. But if you live in a very humid area, when you step outside in the humidity, you're going to notice that your clothes are very sticky. And the reason for that is partially because of the humidity, but it's also partially because you've got some soap solids in your fabric that is making it stickier and stick to you. So Tide wanted to put the right amount of, wanted people to wash their clothes with the right amount of soap. So if you know that 60% of people are putting in too much, or they have no idea, then how do you make it so that they're putting in the right amount? Because you can't change consumer behavior. They're going to do what they're going to do. Well, you dilute it. You put some water in, you take out some soap solids so that when they put in too much, they're actually putting in the right amount, and you come out with a win. Now, not only does it come out with a win for the consumer, but it also comes out as a win with Tide, because they just took out 15% of their soap solids that cost money to make and replaced it with water, which costs nothing. So, their profitability went up dramatically. So that's a good thing from a corporate side. So everybody came out with a win, and Tide made more money. Now we're going to talk about Duncan Hines. So Duncan Hines, they had this research facility outside of Cincinnati I used to love to go to. Because when you walked in, they were baking cakes all day long. And so when you walked in, it smelled great because of all these cakes that are just being baked. And you got a fresh piece of cake that was still warm served to you when you walked up to the reception desk. And you'd sit in your meeting and you'd just eat cake, and it was awesome. And then you'd walk back, just watch the food scientists baking their cakes. And they had these ovens that were perfectly tuned to 325 degrees. They'd mix up their batter and their Cuisinarts. They'll take their spatula and they'll scrape that sucker completely clean so there's not a drop left in it. Put it in the pan, drop that thing in the oven for 20 minutes at 325 degrees, and that cake is absolutely perfect. Now, what just happened there that doesn't happen at home? Yeah, your oven is tuned to 325 degrees. You mixed up your batter, but you probably didn't get every drop of the batter into the pan because, the kids wanted to lick some of it. You might have wanted to lick some of it. You wanted to have some in the bowl that the kids could lick. And so 5% of the batter didn't make it into the pan. Well, now when you bake that cake for 20 minutes at 325 degrees, it's going to come out and it's going to be a little dry. It's not going to be burnt, but it's going to be a little dry. And you're going to take a bite of that cake and you're going to go, this Duncan Hines cake is dry. I'm going to go buy a Pillsbury or Betty Crocker next time. And you've lost a customer. So to combat that, Duncan Hines had to do the opposite. They had to put 5% more cake batter in their bag so that when you leave some of the cake batter in the bowl, you're actually putting the right amount of cake batter in the pan so that when it bakes for 20 minutes at 325 degrees, you get a perfect cake coming out of that. So sometimes you got to adjust things based on what you see the customer doing, because what they do and what they say they're doing are sometimes very different. When you go to the store and you punch in your number or your phone number, or you give them their rewards card, those stores are taking your data and mining it. And like I said, they know when you buy, how much you buy, how frequently you buy, what brands you buy. And they're taking that data and they're selling it to manufacturers who want to target you. And so, they don't give them your name and address, but this is how it would kind of work. So Tropicana, let's say they want to target anybody who's not buying Tropicana orange juice. And so they'll go to Safeway and they'll say, look, I want to target all the people that aren't buying Tropicana. And Safeway will punch into the computer and say, we've got 275,000 people in this city that have bought other brands, not Tropicana. And they'll say, okay, we want to send each of those a $2 coupon. And so they will give the $2 coupons to the store. Safeway will then send those out to the customer, and then they'll see how many of those get redeemed. And then they'll also not only see which got redeemed, but then they'll track those people that redeemed it to see, did it make them switch to Tropicana? Did they suddenly switch brands? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to switch to our brand. So data mining is a big business that stores go through. Now I want to take you through a case study. Several years ago, I worked with a brand called Armour Hot Dogs. And Armour Hot Dogs, back in the 70s, was a very big brand. It was as big as Oscar Mayer. And they were running advertising. They had a really cute jingle that almost everybody could sing the words to. And your grandparents probably can still remember it. It went like this. Hot dogs, Armour Hot Dogs. What kind of kids eat Armour Hot Dogs? Tall kids, short kids, kids who climb on rocks, fat kids, skinny kids, even kids with chicken pox love hot dogs. Armour Hot Dogs, the dogs kids love to bite. Pretty cool song, huh? Yeah. So, over the years, their distribution has dwindled. And now they're primarily a Northeast brand. You've probably never heard of them. But, they compete in the hot dog category. The primary competitors are Oscar Mayer and Ballpark. There's kind of three tiers of hot dogs. There's super premium. Super premium is Nathan's and Hebrew National. There's premium, Oscar Mayer and Ballpark. And then there's generic, which is Smithfield and Bar S. And people would lump Armour in with that group because they didn't feel like they were a brand because they're not really promoted and advertised. So who do you think the target audience is for hot dogs at the grocery store? Well, it's parents with kids ages 12 and under. That's about 60% of the hot dog volume in America, and the other is ballparks and arenas. So it's what we call a low involvement category for moms. She's not eating the hot dog. She's buying the hot dog, she's feeding them to the kids, and if the kids don't throw up or don't complain, it's a successful meal, move on to dinner. And so she doesn't really care, and she's not eating it. As long as the kids are okay with it, she's fine. And so moms are buying, a hot dog that will meet their kids' needs. They're not really worried about how premium they are. So here's the thing. I went to the Armour's research folks, and I said, so what research do you have here? And they gave me a summary memo. And the top number one things consumers say, they want a great tasting hot dog. What? People don't want hot dogs that taste like cardboard? So, not a lot of insight there, but they had their product development team trying to work on a flavor upgrade. Is that going to change the fortunes of Armour Hot Dog? No, because again, as long as it tastes okay and nobody complains, nobody's saying anything. Because nobody sits down and has a taste testing of hot dogs. You don't have an Armour, a Ballpark, a Hebrew National, a Nathan's, and an Armour all there to take a bite out of each and see which one tastes better. Doesn't happen. Here's a really important rule of marketing. It's called gravitational marketing. The only way to disrupt marketplace equilibrium is to do things that are significantly different from what already exists. Significantly different from what already exists. A flavor upgrade is not going to be significantly different from what already exists because nobody's going to know that it even happened. So, I took the brand manager to the store. I said, we need to go try to figure out what it is that we can do to make Armour hot dogs different, better, and special. Let me tell you a story before we get to that. Back when I first got hired at Procter & Gamble, every Saturday night, all the marketing people would get together at somebody's house, and there was these god-awful parties. There were these Ivy League parties where everybody was standing around in their jackets with their glass of wine and talking about their brands in a very, intelligent way. And so you'd walk over to this group and they'd be talking about toothpaste, and you'd go over here and they'd be talking about toilet paper, and over here feminine products. And I wanted to blow my brains out because I'm the only one walking around with a can of Coke in my hand, so I still got all my senses. And so these were horrible. And so I decided that I was going to make myself knowledgeable on every single product that the Procter & Gamble company owned. And so I started a little project, a walkabout I called it, where I would go home from work, I would have dinner, and then I would go down to the grocery store. We had a Kroger store down the street, and I would go stand in this Kroger store in front of a section where P&G had a product, and I would study that product category for 2 hours every single night. And so one night I'd be standing in front of coffee looking at Folgers and its competitors. Another night I'd be standing in front of toothpaste looking at Crest and its competitors. Another night I'd be standing in front of the toilet paper and looking at Charmin and its competitors. And so every night I would spend 2 hours studying these things and turning every package around and reading how all the competitors were positioning themselves and looking at the store shelves and seeing where were they priced and how were they packaged and which ones stood out and which ones didn't. And the first night that I did it, the store manager, after I'd been there for about an hour, got a little concerned and came over and said, hey, what are you doing? Are you stalking people? And I said, no. And I told him what I was doing. And he said, very cool. How can I help? I said, well, I'm trying to study this product category. And he said, well, let me bring you the data. So he ran back to his office, printed off the sales data for the Kroger Corporation so that I could see how every product in that category had been selling. Pretty cool. And every night he would do that. He would go back and find the product category information, and he'd come and bring it out and give it to me. And then the sales clerks too, they started coming over and having conversations. So what are you seeing tonight? What do you think? I'd ask them, well, which one of these do you think is best and why? And are there any new products that have come in lately? And, they're showing me all this stuff. And suddenly I found that I could go to these parties on Saturday night, and if I found myself again in the toothpaste group, I had information, and I could say, I think it's fascinating how fresh breath is more important than cavity fighting, because cavity fighting is something that goes on in your mouth that's invisible, whereas fresh breath is completely obvious every single day. So people worry more about fresh breath than they do about cavities. Yeah, they want the cavity protection, but the fresh breath is what they really are buying. And then I could go over to the toilet paper group, and in that conversation I'd say, I find it fascinating, the number one product consumer complaint in toilet paper, finger poke through. That's why you have to have 2-ply. And so, and I could go over to the feminine protection group too, but I tried to avoid that as much as possible. But suddenly it changed everything, because now I'm able to cross-pollinate ideas between all these categories that I've looked at. What things are similar, what things are dissimilar, and what things seem to translate. So, back to the story. So I took the brand manager to the grocery store and I said, let's go see what we can find out about products that moms ages 6 to 12 buy. So we went to the toy aisle, and we went to the candy aisle, and we went to the juice aisle, and we went to the cereal aisle. Now, in your marketing class in high school, they probably talked to you about the 4 P's of marketing: price, promotion, product, and placement. Now, placement is really a sales issue, getting the distribution out of the marketplace. Price we don't want to screw with because we want to try to have a premium price if at all possible. Product, well, we know that's a losing game, which leaves us with promotion. Promotion. How can we use a promotion to create differentiation, to make us different, better, special, to disrupt marketplace equilibrium? Well, that's going to be hard. So we went to these product categories looking for promotions. And what did we see when we got over to the cereal aisle? There's lots and lots of promotions there, especially with the cereals that are targeted to kids. You can get a free movie ticket. Sometimes you get a free Hot Wheels car. Other times you can get a magic decoder ring. Wow, cool. So how can you take those ideas now and translate those over to hot dogs? Well, you can't put a magic decoder ring in a hot dog package. They'll choke on it. But that's the concept. That's the concept. How are we going to do that? We got to start thinking about that. So, another story. When I was living in Atlanta, I got to be good friends with Hank Aaron, the baseball home run king. He had played for the Braves, he worked for the Braves, he lived there in Atlanta, and one day I'm at a Falcons football game, and he comes walking into the box, and I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. So, I introduced myself to him, I sat down and talked to him. He comes over and sits down next to me, and we had a conversation for 3 hours. When the game gets over, he goes, this is a lot of fun. Why don't we go to dinner? And so we started going to dinner about once a month during the course of my time there. And one night he comes walking into dinner, and he's just grinning from ear to ear. And he says, you're going to love this. And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a check from the Coca-Cola company for $50,000. And I'm looking at him and go, what did you do to get that? And he goes, that's the thing, nothing. I said, what do you mean? They don't just pay you nothing. He said, so when I hit home run number 715 to beat Babe Ruth back in 1982, they signed me to a lifetime endorsement contract for $50,000 a year, and I'm obligated to go out and do like 10 appearances or speaking engagements or play golf with people, whatever they want me to do, 10 times over the course of each year. I said, well, that's pretty cool. So, what do you end up doing? He goes, that's the thing. I haven't done anything since 1984. So this is 1996 now, and it would have been 12 years that he hadn't done a thing and just kept picking up the check for $50,000 every year. So when I got back to work the next day, I walked down to our legal department and I said, hey, I told them that story. I said, have we got anything else that's laying around down here? And they said, they pointed me to this one lawyer, and he opens up this drawer that's got files and files of different things that the Coca-Cola company had bought that people still owed them things on. And so I was able to use a lot of those for the Olympics. So back to the story. We went back to the office of Conagra Foods and said, I wonder if they have a lawyer like Coke had a lawyer with the magic drawer. So we found a lawyer down there, and sure enough, they had a magic drawer, and he pulls open his stuff, and he says, well, let's see. We've got a bunch of Major League Baseball players that owe us stuff, and we said, can we have that? Sure. What players have you got? Well, we've got, I don't know, I've never heard of them. Ken Griffey Jr., Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa, and Derek Jeter of the Yankees. I said, well, yeah, we'll take those. Those are all like Hall of Fame players. So we took those. So what else you got? So, well, we sponsor Pavilion down at Disney World, and so we've got over 100 hotel nights, and we've got tickets to the parks. Nobody's using those. Can we have those? Yeah, sure, have them. So we took all of that stuff, didn't pay a nickel for it because it had already been bought, and we thought, how are we going to put these together now into a promotion for Armour hot dogs? So we thought about stealing an idea from one other place, and that was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So we could put golden tickets in the hot dog packages between the two layers and just glue those in there, and with the wrap around, nobody would know they're there. And we could execute the promotion just like Willy Wonka's golden tickets. So we put it together where you could win a chance to go to Disneyland and have one of the players there to meet you at the gate and to be your tour guide for the entire day. And so we put it together, we put it on the package, we put those out in the marketplace, And we ran that promotion for 3 months. And over the course of the 3 months, market share tripled. Tripled. Which in a market like that, where they have such a small amount of market share anyway, to go from like 2% to 9%, that's a huge jump. And we were able to, establish the brand, and able to get more distribution because of it. Now, granted, we were playing with a deck of cards that had a very low ceiling. Nobody in hot dogs does promotions. And so, we didn't have a bar that we had to jump over that was very high. The only other promotion that goes on in the hot dog category is the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. But that's it. So we were, but again, think about mom now standing in the grocery store. She's going to buy her kids some hot dogs. She looks at the aisle and she says, well, on this one, I might win a chance to go to Disneyland, and I don't on any of the others, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that one. So that was a huge plus and a huge win for Armour Hot Dogs. Now here's the thing. Stealing ideas is a marketer's best friend. Good marketers look at other people's promotions and then figure out how to twist them and make them their own. That's what a good marketer does, because I'm a firm believer that all ideas have been thought of. It's just a matter of pulling out the right one and putting it in place for your brand. So, the only way you're going to steal an idea is if you see the idea. And the only way you're going to see the idea is if you get out and go into stores and start looking and paying attention and kind of cataloging them in the back of your head. And that's what we're going to need to do. We're going to have to go out into stores and look and see what kinds of things we can find. And when we go to do our marketing plan here in a few weeks, we're going to have to do this project for real, where we're going to go out and look at the business that we've chosen. We're going to look at their competitors. We're going to try to figure out how can we make our business or our product or service different, better, and special. And the only way that's going to happen is if you can create some competitive advantage in your mind.